All right, here, y'all. Let's go ahead and welcome back to WSU Baja. We're here. We're here with Jason. Look at him. That's Jason, and this is Voss. He was the ex-host, but we got about 7 views, so we went ahead and went a different direction with this video. As you can see, we put the buggy back together. Let's make sure to get a couple close-ups of tube, because that is how you make videos, folks. That is how it is done. Have anything to say, Voss? Yeah, we don't care what he has to say. Let's go ahead and check out what Jason's doing back here. Make sure that we put in the splash guard. Protection, it's important. Remember that, kids. This is a family-oriented video, but protection is key. This is so that if the gas tank leaks, it doesn't get all over the engine and the driver doesn't explode, because we don't want Voss here to explode, do we, people?
What's going on, guys? It's a new day, and today we're working on getting this thing put back together. It's about 30 degrees right now in Ohio. It's supposed to get up to like 75 degrees in the next 4 hours. That's typical Ohio for you. But we got Jason over here. He's working on getting the rear suspension and the wheels put back together. And here's the trailing arm that we showed yesterday, as well as the radius arms. And he's working on getting the little cotter pin and the castle nut washer put back on the wheels to keep it from moving. But these radius arms, they add a little bit of adjustability to account for the toe on these wheels. And if you just move this guy back and forth, you can adjust the way the wheel sits, try to get it as aligned as possible. A few things left to do before we put this back together is to get the rear firewall. We put, if you can tell, we put this weather stripping on there to keep it, dampen it a little bit, to keep it from making a bunch of noise. So that needs to go back on. And then the seat needs to go on, as well as all these little mounting tabs on the bottom here. These go to some body panels that we cut up, so those need to go on and get weather stripped and sealed as well. If we go in here, here's the rear axles that we used. These came off of a, they're an off-brand knockoff for a Polaris Racer, the XP1000, and we had to make a couple adjustments to them. If I come in real close, you can kind of see, here's a little piece that we had to cut down. We had to cut this down approximately 7 inches and welded it back together. And then the other thing we had to do is we actually put this together before we painted it, and you can see the little pin in there. We had to pin the CV attachment pieces that we made because press fitting them wasn't enough. This had a little too much torque, so it sheared those joints. All right, guys, I got Jason here. He's on the drivetrain team. I always screw this up, but him and Tom, one of the other guys, they came up with this sprocket and chain setup, and Jason's gonna explain a little bit about some of the components that are found here and why we chose to go with this over a custom gearbox or some of the other setups you can see.
So we ended up going with a chain and sprocket instead of the gearbox that most teams run, mainly because we didn't have enough money to build a custom gearbox and we didn't have enough time. And I had some inner workings of chains before with racing four-wheelers and such. So basically what we did was we took a front drive chain or drive shaft with a sprocket to a rear drive sprocket to reduce the ratio to what we wanted to be about 6.5, plus the 4 that was already being reduced by the CVT. So we really have a ratio from 6.5 to 10, which provides optimal torque but still gives you a good top end. So in order to then use independent suspension, which was kind of interesting compared to running a racing four-wheeler which has a swing arm style suspension, we had to come up with some kind of adapter to come from this straight axle to come to these CV joints. So what we did was we pretty much took a piece of 1018 steel, milled it down, pressed it in there, drilled it, put a shear pin in it, and tried to make the angles work, which the wheelbase is way shorter now because of having to put the adapter in here. We also mounted a brake back here to the rear axle instead of mounting it individually to the hubs because we didn't have enough room to
One
put
thing
it
I want to
inside
add is that these axles, they aren't the ones that Polaris uses or distributes. They're these off-brand ones, and you can kind of explain to them, but like the first 70 thousandths is essentially like super what is that?
It's really soft compared
Yeah.
to the center, which is really odd because when you harden steel, the outside gets harder, the inside stays soft. So I don't know what kind of of Chinese axles these are, but so far they're working. Just kind of a word of advice, just because, you know, they say they fit the same part doesn't mean they're the same level of quality.
I remember when I was welding them up, to start the puddle on the very beginning, it was like super simple, and then it barely got into the rest of it. As after you went about 70 thousandths in, it was really hard to get full penetration, and then you had to be extra careful to keep it from warping and sugaring and all the other stuff you don't want when you weld, because we don't have any back gas for argon here. But here's Jason's testing out some of the toe on here. And another thing is that component up here goes to this banjo bolt, and what that does is it is an electronic banjo bolt, and it wires up to the front, keeping us from having to run a second set of spline. And he can kind of explain a little more of why we chose to do that and the cost reasons.
So we had to have two independent reservoirs, which you can see here, one for the rear, one for the back, or one for the rear, one for the front. And off each line you have to have a pressure switch to activate the brake light. So up front we went ahead and spliced into the line a typical style brake pressure sensor, but because it's expensive to buy the joints and the fittings and then cut your hard line and your soft line, instead we were lucky enough that Spiegler provided us an electronic banjo bolt actually off of a Harley Davidson. So instead of having to cut the line and do all that, I mean, it's literally plug and play. This is also important if you have like a dirt bike and you're trying to get it street legal. So having to cut your brake lines, you just pop out your old banjo bolt, put a new one in there, run it to your rear brake light, and you're good to go.
Another cool thing that we got from Spiegler that kind of took care of a couple problems is this chain. It's so heavy that you don't even need a tensioner for it. What's going on, guys? We're back, and basically, since we did a little work off camera, Jason over here, he kind of took the initiative to put a lot of the stuff back together, but he's tightening up the splash guard right now, and we're about ready for its first official drive. We did a drive last week, or a couple weeks ago. They screwed it up pretty bad, so we're gonna try this again. Yeah, old Jason, old Dad, and RJ, pretty degenerates, so so we're gonna give us a little drive, see how it goes, and see if we shear anything. So let's get it. So RJ, he's ripping around right now. I don't know how loud it is, but it's looking pretty good.
Brakes work okay? Brakes okay? I'm glad I'm by myself, so I don't know.
All right, Jason's tightening up the wheels. We're about to go for the, well, I'm about to go for the first official drive. We good? I'll be right back.
He'll be right back. Yeah, I'm not having to tighten it up.
Goes off, you can lean to the outside of the curve. I hope he picks up.
It's another Hilltard that we had helping working on this buggy. He's taught us a lot of stuff, how to unscrew stuff up that we screwed up.
All right, guys, so we just drove this thing a little bit, and we ran into a few issues. So you can tell here, here's our CVT, and this guy right here has been, we added these 1/2-inch spacers. I don't don't know if you can tell, to heighten this up a little and get a little more slack. And now we're running into the problem that it's not catching quick enough when you press the gas down. So we might have to lower this down a little bit and adjust the ramps until it hits that kind of the sweet spot to where it'll idle and without moving. But as soon as you press the gas down a little bit and get a little throttle, it should take off a little more. So we're gonna get to fixing that, and we still have to, we put this rear panel in, but kind of on the sides here, it's a little tight, so I'm gonna have to cut this down and re-put another piece in here and rivet it up. So we're gonna get to working on that now. Alright guys, we're back, and we ran into a slight issue. We got Horny Tom here, and he basically, him, Jason, and just about everyone that's driven this now has run into the same issue. And this ball joint right here, it's only rated for about 160 pounds of force, and I don't know, Tom, what'd you do?
I screwed it.
What happened?
I turned to the right and it broke the right tire, which ain't good. It also means the force was on the left tire, so that's just
Yeah, that doesn't make much sense. So we're working on trying to get that fixed, and while we're doing that, like I was saying earlier, we ran into some issues with the CVT back here, and we wanted to adjust the height of where the pillow blocks are sitting. So it's going from about a 1/2 inch to about 3/16 inch off. So this should give a little more, well, it should actually tighten this belt right here, so it grabs a little more instead of slipping every time we take off. We got RJ back here working on it. Alright guys, so we did a little more work off camera, but we got all the rivets in, or most of the rivets in the rear firewall, and the only thing really left to do now is to get this bottom panel in. It's gonna go in under here, and then after we do that, we put most of the mounting tabs in for the side panels, so all of the panels need to go in. That's gonna have to be for another video. But if you enjoyed this video, you should like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for more content, and let us know what you'd like to see.
It's a pull-up. Yeah. CrossFit pull-up.